The rain in Seattle has a way of talking you out of the day without asking permission. It taps on glass and makes traffic courteous and gives grief a coat to wear in public. On the afternoon my life decided to declare itself under new management, I was parked outside our daughter's daycare with the wipers set to a lazy heartbeat. Nora Quinn. That is the name on the clipboard when I sign her out, and the name the security camera learns every weekday at 5:11. I leaned back in the seat and scrolled a grocery list and a small calendar of the week ahead. Work shipments. A visit from my sister. Soccer shoes that pinch. Nothing on that list hinted at a flight across an ocean or a betrayal with a sunlit view. The pickup was the same routine we had learned by repetition. The door buzzer. The smell of crayons and hand soap. The teacher who says she is a delight even when delight looks like pink construction paper taped to everything in reach. I buckled her in and she handed me a sticker shaped like a star and told me it was for being brave at work. I would think about that line later and wonder what kind of animal instinct lives in children who award bravery without a prompt. Traffic crawled as we drove across the bridge. The sky had the color of a pencil eraser, and the lake looked like a sheet of solder. I turned on the radio and turned it off again because voices felt like a crowd I had not invited. My phone vibrated once like a small cough. A bank alert slid across the lock screen. International transaction attempt. Review required. I glanced at the rearview mirror to make sure her head was tilted towards sleep. It was. I tapped the alert and read about a wire request to an IBAN I did not recognize. Lisbon. The word sat on the screen with the confidence of a postcard that believes it is timely. I did not panic. Panic wastes the first hour, and the first hour decides the rest. I pulled into a grocery store lot and let the car idle and opened the app that holds the bones of our money. A second alert arrived. Card present charge at an airport bar on the other side of the country. My husband Tyler was in product at a company that sells answers to people who ask their phones questions. He had scheduled late meetings. He had smiled his way out the door with a rollerboard and a kiss that felt like a receipt. International, Lisbon, Mistress. The last word did not arrive then. It waited in a pocket and would crawl out later when I had time to hate it. I called the bank and used the calm that makes call center people choose to help you first. I reported the wire as unauthorized. I asked for a freeze on any outgoing international transfer attempts from joint accounts and for a flag on the card ending in the numbers that will live in a drawer in my head forever. The agent read a script and then dropped her voice just enough to let me know she is a person who understands the gravity of a mother in a car, with a sleeping child and a plane taking off somewhere without her permission. She set the hold. She documented my call. She gave me a case number, and I wrote it on the back of the grocery list because paper is better than oxygen when you need the next breath. When we reached home, I moved through the motions of dinner as if food could hold the walls up by itself. Macaroni, bread, sliced apple. I answered questions about a class turtle and a boy named Milo who refuses to nap. I read 2 pages from a book where animals choose kindness. I tucked her in and sat on the floor next to her bed until the breath of sleep arrived and did its quiet work. Then I stood and became another kind of person, the kind with folders and discipline. I opened the laptop and pulled up statements and email. I searched travel confirmations and saw his flight to New York and a connection to Lisbon nested in an email about a customer summit. I opened the calendar we share for logistics and found a meeting called Europe Prep that had been sitting there like a decoy duck on a pond. I checked the smart lock app and saw the door code used at odd hours I had attributed to the restlessness of a man who can never land a day gently. I wrote times and charges and miles the way I plan freight routes when the holiday crush tries to make logic surrender. I filed a preservation letter to the bank, requesting logs for the day and the week before. I drafted another to the card issuer. I typed a third to the airline asking them to retain check and metadata and boarding scans for any passenger traveling under our family account numbers. I did not accuse anyone of anything. I invoked policy and the pale strength of compliance. In the morning, I told Daycare that a different person would pick her up on Thursday and Friday, and I gave them the name of my sister with a copy of her identification. I told my manager I would be remote for a week and that the work would not notice. Logistics is a religion whose God rewards people who decide early. I lined up coverage. I loaded my notes into a document with headings that no one else would ever read but me. Timeline, accounts, HR, legal. When my sister arrived, she asked what flavor of trouble we were eating. I told her it was the kind that tasted like salt air and good lighting. She asked if she should rage on my behalf. I told her to rage later. Right now, I needed her to build bubbles around bedtime and pickups and breakfast and the homework page with the word frost written on top like a dare to winter. She nodded and told me that rage can hold like a charge in a battery until the weather requires it. I took the bus downtown and walked to a building where family law looks out over the Sound. The lawyer I chose is named Asha, and she has a way of speaking that puts power back into nouns. She asked for the story, and I told it like a bill of lading. Time, place, weight, contents. I did not smear adjectives on the facts. She mapped a path with a thin black pen. Temporary financial restraining order, accounting of recent transfers, protective orders regarding travel with minor children. Service by alternate means if he tries to turn distance into safety. Discovery for the funds, squirreled into whatever sunlit room he has rented with what he believed to be our future. She asked about work. I told her Tyler's company has a remote work policy that looks permissive on the surface and brittle when you read the footnotes. International is a word that scares compliance because tax and data privacy and labor law all begin to raise their hands at once. She nodded and told me to send a quiet note to HR that simply asked for a copy of policy and a confirmation of whether a unilateral relocation outside the United States is permissible without a contract addendum. We crafted that note so it read like a person asking where to put the recycling. I left her office with a folder that felt less like paper and more like scaffolding. I walked by the water and let the gulls heckle me until I remembered I could laugh. Then I went home and cleaned the kitchen the way you clean after an earthquake reveals which shelves were never secure. I found a receipt in the junk drawer for a deposit on a temporary apartment with a name that sounded like a dream for people who hate chores. I looked it up. Photos of a small balcony with a view of terracotta roofs and the river like a ribbon the city forgot to tie. The payment had been made with a card that includes my name. That meant the dispute would be mine to file. I slept with the window cracked, and the rain came back like a friend who forgives your forgetfulness. In the morning, I drove to the bank branch and shook hands with a manager who knows me as the woman who never asks for overdraft favors. I provided the paperwork for a freeze on outbound international wires and a restriction on transfers above a level that would make a realtor smile. I moved the emergency fund to an account with my name only and updated the beneficiary entries to reflect the new reality where trust has to be earned again before it shares a line with assets. By noon, a reply from HR at Tyler's company arrived. It contained a copy of the remote work policy, highlighted in the gentle tone of corporate. It explained that any work performed outside the United States required approval from legal and payroll, and that data access from outside designated jurisdictions was prohibited. It asked Tyler to schedule a conversation with HR to confirm his location. It CC'd a compliance officer whose biography reads like a woman who has kept the roof attached to 5 companies through storms. I forwarded the message to Asha and filed it in a folder called Sane People. I spent the next hours building a lattice of proof: boarding, card present, geotags, hotel email with a Lisbon phone number in the footer, social posts from a woman named Inez who had recently added the word love to a photo of a hand I knew too well placed on a cafe table near tiled walls, story bubbles with tram tracks and sardines grilled with an affection that felt like theater. I captured them. I wrote times below each capture so a judge later could see the line that ties Seattle rain to Portuguese sun with the stubborn accuracy of clocks. Late afternoon brought a call from the bank confirming that the attempted IBAN transfer had been blocked and that a fraud case number now lived next to it. The agent asked if I wanted to place a travel alert on the account in case legitimate charges appeared from abroad. I said there would be no legitimate charges from abroad on that account anymore. I asked for a supervisor to note that a financial restraining order was expected and that I would present it as soon as the judge signed the paper that turns wind into wall. My sister sent me a photo of our daughter asleep with a book open on her chest and a pencil in her hand like a tiny scholar who forgot where she put the night. I looked at the photo and felt something inside me re-thread itself into a rope. The plan was not rage. The plan was safety. The plan was a room with a bed and a calendar with stickers and a lunchbox that comes home with a half-eaten apple and a note from a teacher who always finds a way to congratulate effort. Tyler called, and I let it go to voicemail because meat needs to rest after heat, and so do people. He left a message full of the kind of confidence men use when they think distance adds authority. He said this move was a sabbatical of spirit. He said Europe understands work-life balance. He said we would be better after a season of exploration. He said nothing about our daughter or the calendar on the fridge or the fact that the total of the rent due here and there exceeds any math we had ever agreed to. I saved the audio file and added the time to my document because even nonsense can be useful when it proves itself in sequence. The next morning, Asha filed the motion for temporary financial restraints and the petition for dissolution. She included a request for orders regarding travel with minor children. The clerk stamped copies that smelled like toner and new rules. We sent a preservation letter to the Lisbon rental agency asking them to retain all communications and payment records and any documents that indicate who requested entry into the lease. We requested their cancellation policy and pointed out that the payment card had 2 names, and therefore any dispute would need to be honored in the jurisdiction where that card was issued. I sent a separate message to my card issuer with a concise narrative and attachments. Card networks speak a language that respects exhibits more than emotions. On day 3, HR at Tyler's company sent a second note this time with fewer adjectives. It stated that his access would be limited until HR spoke to him. It asked for his current location for payroll tax reasons. It copied legal. I watched the login logs show a flurry of access from an IP range that belonged to a co-working space in Lisbon. I sent that observation to HR with a line that said simply, "This may help." They thanked me without saying thank you and asked me not to interact with his equipment if it was in our home. It was not. The home felt suddenly like a place that had finished an audit and passed. The rental agency in Lisbon responded with a corporate politeness that smells faintly of salt. They wrote that the deposit would be subject to cancellation rules and that they were happy to assist any card issuer investigation. They attached a copy of the rental agreement with a signature that looked like the one I had watched Tyler practice as a teenager when we bought our first couch on layaway. I highlighted my name on the payment line and sent the packet to the dispute inbox with a subject that did not beg. On day 4, the judge granted the temporary orders. The bank received them by fax because some things have not upgraded since the world learned to read news on phones. The holds became a wall instead of a net. The HR department scheduled a call with Tyler for the following morning. They included in their invite a link that explains the risk of processing company data from foreign jurisdictions without clearance. I sat at the table and breathed with both lungs for the first time since the car in the grocery store lot. In the afternoon, a message slid in from Inez. It was not to me. It was to the room she had decorated online for her friends. She wrote about a new chapter and about a man who had chosen joy. She posted a photo of tiles under her feet and another of a white curtain and a sliver of water beyond the rooftops. The caption included a time that overlapped with the moment my daughter had drawn a sun in crayon that took up the entire page and pressed the paper into waves. I took a screenshot. I wrote the time. I did not look at it again. The call with HR happened in the morning in Seattle and mid-afternoon in Lisbon. I did not attend, but I heard the result later through the quiet pipeline of people who believe families deserve to know what a paycheck plans to do. HR placed him on leave, pending verification of location and compliance with policy. His laptop access was restricted to email that contained nothing he could use to argue with payroll. The next bank alert said a card had been declined at a cafe near the oldest cathedral in the city. The decline code danced in my mind like a small victory parade that respects zoning laws. Tyler texted me, and the tone had shifted to the bewildered indignation of a man whose story forgot to sell tickets in advance. He demanded to know why the bank would not cooperate with his plan to become European. He demanded to know why HR believed geography mattered. He demanded to know whether I had poisoned the well. I replied with a sentence that invited adulthood. All household changes of this magnitude require mutual consent and compliance with policy. For the rest, we will speak through counsel. He wrote back a string of sentences where each one tried to replace the previous. I filed them quietly. Then I took our daughter to the park because the sun had decided to audition for spring. She ran along the path that circles the pond and yelled at ducks like they were employees. She fell once and dusted her hands and made a face that said, "Falling requires an audience." I clapped and she stood and announced that the ground started it. Later on a bench, I read her a page about a rabbit who counted clouds, and she asked how to count something that changes shape. I told her you count anyway because counting is how you stay friendly with time. Asha scheduled mediation for 3 weeks out and a status conference for 2. She drafted a request for constructive trust over any funds transferred to Ines for rent or services linked to Tyler's relocation. She filed a discovery request for Tyler's travel receipts and communications with the landlord and any visa consultants. She prepared a packet for the Portugal side in case we needed to domesticate orders there. She did not promise fireworks. She promised gravity. I found a receipt for a visa consultation in his email. It used the language of facilitators who know bureaucracy like a river. It asked for a retainer that had already been paid with money from a joint account. I flagged the charge in the dispute portal and attached the temporary orders. I wrote a sentence that reminded the reader that a joint account requires joint decisions to finance new lives. The portal thanked me with a case number that looked like a ship name. The next week was a geography lesson taught by Banks and Air. There were holds. There were chargebacks. There were messages from support desks in 3 time zones and at least 6 flavors of courtesy. There were nights when the house made the tiny groans houses make, when they miss the weight of one person but appreciate the new balance. There were mornings when the kitchen radio made gentler jokes than the day before. There were afternoons when I left work early and stood at the fence at school and watched her run toward me with a backpack bouncing, and I felt bigger than the problem by exactly her weight. News traveled back from Lisbon through the casual cruelty of social life. Inez posted less. Tyler posted nothing. A friend of a friend sent a note that said he had been seen at a cafe arguing with someone on his phone, and that the argument looked like a bad film with good lighting. I did not reply. I do not need field notes from a city that owes me nothing. I need the court to say words that turn the next year into a set of navigable lanes. On the morning of the status conference, the sky tried on blue. The courtroom was small enough to make voices accountable. Tyler appeared by video with a backdrop that looked like a wall someone bought for a startup pitch. Asha spoke in our square, and the judge listened in the way judges listen when they know both people have brains and one of them has decided not to use his. Asha outlined the timeline and the policy violations and the financial flight that had been interrupted. She asked for continuance of the financial restraints and for an order limiting unscheduled contact to a window that would preserve bedtime and school mornings. The judge granted the requests and set expectations like a teacher who has been at this for 30 years and still loves the first day of class. On the afternoon of the call, our chargeback on the apartment deposit moved from intake to review accepted. I watched the status inch forward and felt an absurd affection for the people whose job it is to verify. I imagined them at desks with good chairs and bad coffee reading receipts and deciding that a word matches another word enough to justify moving money back across a border. I sent them a silent thank you the way you thank air when it tastes clean after rain. Tyler wrote that night with an idea he considered generous. He proposed that I sell the house and bring our daughter for a long visit, and that we try living like citizens of the world. I answered with a sentence that said nothing new. We will proceed through counsel. He told me I was small. I told him I was careful. He told me I was cruel. I told him I was a mother. On a Friday that surprised itself by being kind, The daycare held a family picnic in the gym because Mud had won the playground. I sat on a folded mat and watched her build a fort out of chairs and blankets, with 2 other children who moved like future architects. A teacher whispered that she has handled the transition with grace and that she loves routines. I nodded and said, "So do I." When we drove home, I let her choose the song, and she chose a track with hand claps and a chorus that repeats the word home until even a cynic has to sing it. The chargeback landed on Monday. The funds returned into the account with a line that read, "Dispute resolved in your favor." I stared at the words until they became water. I paid the mortgage and the utilities and the daycare bill in that order, because those are the 3 fundamentals of our current peace. I ordered a vacuum part I had been ignoring and fixed a squeak in the closet door because small noises become big when you let grief run unsupervised. A message from HR arrived midweek informing me that Tyler had been placed on unpaid leave pending completion of their review. They thanked me for my earlier inquiry and reminded me not to discuss company matters in public channels. I closed the email and looked out the window and saw a slice of blue between 2 buildings and decided to call it a sign, even though signs are a habit for people who need permission. I did not need permission. I needed stamps and a calendar and apple slices and a strong back. At mediation, the neutral sat us down and asked for versions. Asha spoke for me. Tyler tried to speak for himself and ended up selling sympathy to a room that trades only in facts. He said Lisbon represents a chance to reset. He said he would send money when he could. He said the apartment in Seattle can be sublet. He said the child will love learning a new language. Asha did not raise her voice. She said stability for a 5-year-old beats scenery. She said joint funds are not a slush for secret new lives. She said the court has already issued orders and the bank has already listened. The mediator proposed numbers. Asha adjusted them until they stopped insulting math. Tyler asked for time. We gave him a week. The week made a noise in my chest that I recognized as the last grace I could afford. In that week, the apartment in Lisbon turned out to be less romantic without heat from a steady paycheck. The landlord sent a notice about the next month due and reminded the tenant that non-payment leads to locks that forget kindness. The visa consultant sent a polite request for additional documents and a reminder that health insurance is required at a level that makes Americans laugh until they cry. The bank held a second attempt at a transfer and improved the warning label. The company turned off access to systems that prove you still work there. The phone Tyler used began to prefer Wi-Fi and cafe chairs. He sent one more message with a tone that I recognized from years of building furniture from boxes. It said some assembly required. He asked what he needed to sign to make this nightmare stop. Asha sent terms that did not gloat. He signed quickly, and the notary in his co-working space did the stamp, while pretending not to be part of a novel. The agreement gave me the house, the car, the accounts that pay for food and school and heat. It gave our daughter a stable schedule, and it gave Tyler a path to see her that runs on video until he returns with a plan the court respects. It took from him the right to remove her from the state without a judge blessing that idea with holy water. I walked to the waterfront and watched a ferry push the cold aside. I wanted to feel victorious. What I felt was housed. The roof sat on the walls and the walls hugged around the air, and the air did not feel rented. I bought a hot chocolate for a child who would always be mine, and a coffee for a sister who had stood guard while I built. We drank and watched the gulls and laughed about nothing, which is what safety sounds like when it finally learns a melody. Weeks pass. Spring remembers the name of the city. Our daughter loses a tooth and writes a note to a mythical economist who pays for enamel. I tape the note to her door and arrange 2 coins under her pillow and a small card that says, "Brave." Tyler calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6, and we put the phone on a stand and he reads a book and asks about school and says things adults say when they are hoping their mistakes are not the only sentences their child will memorize. Some nights she loses interest and runs away to draw a mural on the back of a cereal box. He pretends not to notice, and I give him that mercy because the world has not finished teaching him how to be small. I learn words from Lisbon through the radio and the internet, and a woman at the market who once tiled her own kitchen. Miraduro, bica, saudade. I turn them over in my mouth and feel how language can carry weather. The court finalizes the orders and the clerk stamps a decree that reads like a calm after a storm. Asha sends me a copy. I frame nothing. I file and then I cook. When I finally sleep a full night without waking at the hour when airplanes leave, I dream of lists written in pencil that never smear. I dream of a bridge that does not wobble when a truck crosses it. I dream of my daughter as a scientist who names a star after the day we taught each other how to stay. I wake before the alarm and watch light climb the wall like it has been practicing for years. The grocery list returns to normal. Milk, apples, pasta, batteries. I add a line for a treat because treats matter when you are building a life from the honest parts of the old one. I swap out a broken lamp for one that makes the room feel less like a waiting room. I invite friends over for soup and we eat at the table I refuse to sell, and they tell me my house feels larger, and I tell them it is not the house. It is the absence of a plan that tried to shrink it. There are moments when grief arrives late and undresses the room. I let it sit. I pour it water. I tell it I have appointments. I do not let it borrow the keys. I have a child to take to the park and a job that feeds us, and a mother who calls on Sundays, and a plant that refuses to die despite my inconsistent affection. I have socks that finally match, and a bathroom drawer that closes all the way because I fixed the rail with a hardware store screw, and a moment of courage. If you ask me what the revenge was, I will say it was not the bank holds or the HR email or the chargeback that made a landlord glum. Those were tools. The revenge was silence, where a speech wanted to be. The revenge was a bedtime that did not move. The revenge was a lunch packed the night before. The revenge was a woman at a desk writing times down while the world tried to sell her a flight to somewhere that smells like lemons. The revenge was dignified paperwork and the lack of panic. The revenge was a home that did not entertain a story it did not audition. Tyler returns months later to negotiate at a table that always preferred solid wood to glossy veneers. He arrives without fanfare. He does not mention Lisbon. He mentions only schedules. He signs what needs signing. He says the sentence men say when they finally stop arguing with the floor. I'm sorry. I nod and offer coffee. He declines. We coordinate summer weeks and what to do about soccer camp and who buys the next shoes when feet do what feet do. We speak like people who survived a building that did not collapse entirely and now live on opposite sides of the street. There will be other storms. There will be school forms and fevers and broken things and new jobs and old habits. There will be mornings when the sky forgets to pick a color and nights when the moon refuses to show its face. There will be picnics and lost teeth and crayons that require scraping off the table. There will be learning. I will set my jaw and my schedule and my alarms. I will measure what can be measured and guess kindly at what cannot. I will stand in courtrooms if I must and kitchens if I can choose. I will keep a drawer for documents and a drawer for toys and a drawer for the notebooks where I practice being the person my child thinks I already am. When he arrived, it was not to applause. It was to a room with a calendar and a child who wanted to show him the flower she had drawn that day. She gave him the picture, and he said nice, and she told him it is a sunflower, not a daisy, and he laughed and corrected himself, and I let the scene be what it was. Then I made dinner and asked if he wanted to stay, and he said he could not, and I said, of course. And I sent him a list of the next scheduled calls, and I washed dishes under water that felt like something holy. The house hummed. The night moved over the roof like a patient animal. The city exhaled and took me with it. I am not a hero. I am a logistics manager who believes in lists and wheels that turn on time. I am a mother who counts the apples and the socks and the minutes until bedtime with gentle precision. I am a woman who built a plan and stuck to it while another plan tried to turn the sky into a screensaver. I held. The bank held. The court held. The roof held. The child slept. The morning came. The ferry moved across the water like a sentence that knows where it is going. And when the next chapter asks what I will do, I will choose again the unglamorous verbs. Note, file, call, cook, sleep, wake, carry. I keep the case numbers in a folder. I keep the drawings on the fridge. I keep the schedule on the wall at kid height where she can touch it and believe that time is a friend. I keep the habit of writing the weather at the top of the page because someday she will read these pages and laugh at how her mother narrated clouds. I keep a coin in the console of the car for the days when parking meters call for old-fashioned respect. I keep a jar of rice and a pinch of saffron because Lisbon still exists, and not every memory should be punished for sharing a city with a mistake. I stand by the window sometimes and watch the rain cross the street, and I think about arrival. Planes land. Boats dock. People show up late to rooms they left without closing the door. When he arrived, he met the life that stayed, and the life that stayed did not apologize for surviving. The welcome was not warm or cold. It was accurate. Here is the schedule. Here are the shoes. Here is the list. Here is the child who needs a story before bed and a permission slip signed and a mother who did not set the house on fire to get free. Here is the river, doing what rivers do. Here are the lights of the city. Here am I, steady, writing, ready to do it again tomorrow. And tomorrow arrives. The alarm is a bird who does not sing so much as insist. The coffee tastes like something earned. The lunchbox clicks shut. The shoes are tied twice. The car warms. The street makes room. The daycare door buzzes and opens, and I sign the clipboard and smile at the teacher who has made a science of kindness. We drive. The sky is undecided. The bank is calm. The calendar has boxes with stickers and a line through Lisbon, like a border in a map that a child has edited with intense crayon. I set my jaw at a gentle angle. I rest my hand on the wheel. I go to work. On the best days, the work and the home feel like bridges I am allowed to maintain. I tighten bolts. I replace boards. I post signs where needed. The crossing is safe because I respect weight limits. I say no to trucks that would bow the span. I say yes to pedestrians and families and bikes that ring tiny bells. When a storm moves in, I lower the gates and wait for the water to finish its story. Then I raise the gates and sweep the grit and let the traffic back on. People cross and never think about the person who kept their feet dry. This is fair. The person who kept their feet dry is thinking about dinner. The last part of the plan is small. I write 3 lines each night before sleep. Line 1 is the weather. Line 2 is one thing I fixed or kept from breaking. Line 3 is one thing I let go that I otherwise would have gripped. The notebook is thin. The habit is heavy in the hand in the way a tool is heavy. Some nights, line 2 is as grand as court order served. Some nights, it is as humble as squeak reduced in hallway. Some nights, line 3 is the city of Lisbon itself. Some nights, it is only a sentence I did not send. This is how we live now, not by flights, by steps, not by grand gestures, by competent ones, not by noise, by the rhythm of small, accurate acts. And when the next storm wanders toward my street, I will be here with my folder and my pan and my calm and my stubborn belief that roofs are worth the work if the bed under them is warm and the child sleeping in it knows the word home like it is a song written for her. Spring softened the edges of the neighborhood, and the rain learned to arrive like a visitor with manners. The ferry sounded its horn in the morning, and the city answered with buses that kept their promises. I woke before the alarm, and the house felt like a place that remembered my name. Breakfast existed without negotiation. The day did not audition for tragedy. It simply asked for the list, and I gave it what it needed. The orders turned from paper into a floor we could stand on. Bills paid in the same order every month. Pickups and bedtimes marked on a calendar at kid height where a small hand could touch the plan and believe it. The bank stopped shouting. HR closed its file with a line that read, "Compliant and nothing else." The apartment across the ocean became a photograph instead of a bill. The house here returned to its job. I kept the discipline that had saved us, and I let it be quiet. Files lived in a drawer that did not need an audience. Alerts only spoke when a number crossed a line. Proof existed but did not strut through rooms that now preferred the language of kitchens, laundry, homework, and sleep. I went back to cooking simple things that tell the truth about hunger. Soup that makes patience, rice that forgives distraction, bread that rewards waiting. On a clear Saturday, we walked the long way home from the market and stopped at the rail to watch a ferry push water apart. My daughter named the gulls like neighbors and told me the boat looked like a sentence that already knows its period. I laughed and told her that some days end clean because someone respected the grammar of effort. She asked if grammar can fix weather. I said it can make it easier to stand under. He called on schedule and learned to speak in the time the court gave him. He read a story and asked about school and remembered to say good job. Some nights she drifted away before the last page and colored in the corner while he talked to an empty screen. He kept reading. I let him. Mercy is a form of strength when it does not ask for applause. Work trusted me with routes that behave only when a patient mind holds the board. Numbers did not lie when asked the right way. Policies kept their shape. Managers thanked me for steadiness, and I answered with steadiness, because that is the currency that pays best in the long run. I closed laptops at a reasonable hour and opened a book instead. Sleep returned like a river, finding its old bed. Seattle found its summer. We ate outside on stoops and steps, and the air smelled like cut grass and salt. My sister teased me for counting spoons after dinner, and I told her order is a kindness you can taste. She laughed and said kindness is a meal you can serve twice. I believed her. We stopped measuring survival in heroics and started measuring it in full lunches and on time pickups and a drawer that closes without a fight. When the first cold front came back, the water turned steel and the streetlights drew thin gold lines across wet pavement. I stood at the window and thought about the night in the parking lot when a bank alert tried to turn my life into a chase scene. I did not chase. I built. I kept. I filed. I waited. The reward was not applause. It was a house that holds, and a child who sleeps, and a woman who trusts herself again. Final papers arrived and nothing exploded. The clerk stamped a circle and the sound felt like a lid clicking onto a jar. I scanned and filed and then made dinner. The day did not ask for speech. It asked for competent hands. We ate and told small stories about school and a dog that refuses to respect fences, and a teacher who makes science sound like a secret worth keeping. Later, I washed dishes and the water ran clear, and the window showed a piece of sky that did not need to prove anything. If you ask what the revenge was, I will say it looked like a routine that would not bend for someone else's fantasy. It looked like a plan that kept the roof honest and the child fed and the accounts calm. It looked like a woman who chose paperwork over spectacle and won back a life without asking strangers to clap. It looked like a city that continued and a home that learned to be itself without permission. By the time leaves began to silver under autumn wind, the house no longer waited for footsteps that did not belong. Mornings arrived on time, and so did we. I worked and cooked and read and slept, and none of it asked to be a spectacle. When storms moved over the sound, I brewed tea and checked the doors with my palm and felt the frame answer. The future did not promise to be easy. It promised to be ours if we showed up. We show up. By the time leaves began to silver under autumn wind, the house no longer waited for footsteps that did not belong. Mornings arrived on time, and so did we. I worked and cooked and read and slept, and none of it asked to be a spectacle. When storms moved over the sound, I brewed tea and checked the doors with my palm and felt the frame answer. The future did not promise to be easy. It promised to be ours if we showed up. We show up. By the time leaves began to silver under autumn wind, the house no longer waited for footsteps that did not belong. Mornings arrived on time, and so did we. I worked and cooked and read and slept, and none of it asked to be a spectacle. When storms moved over the Sound, I brewed tea and checked the doors with my palm and felt the frame answer. The future did not promise to be easy. It promised to be ours if we showed up. We show up.